So let's continue with that discussion now. The Fair Trade Independent Tobacco Association has served government with court papers filed at the High Court in Pretoria to challenge the ban on the sale of cigarettes during level 4 lockdown. It says government has not adequately shown how the banning of the sale of tobacco products would help reduce the spread of COVID-19. So President Cyril Ramaphosa announced the new 5-level approach to the lockdown last Thursday and said the sale of cigarettes would be allowed at level 4. That's where we are now. Level 4 began on Friday, but then on Wednesday, as you heard from our colleague Abongile Dumako there, the COCTA Minister Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma announced that the ban would remain. The Fair Trade Independent Tobacco Association's Chairperson, Sinenhlanhla Mnguni, joins me now via Skype. Sinenhlanhla, very good evening to you. Thanks indeed for your time.
Good evening, Griselda. Thank you again for having me on your show.
Thank you. Sinenhlanhla, so your main gripe in terms of the papers that I saw, or your case, according to these papers, is that government has not shown or proved a medical fact how the banning of cigarettes will assist in the spread of COVID-19. What would you like the court to take into consideration?
Yes, thank you, Griselda. That is one of many arguments which we raise in our court papers. I mean, we also deal with the effects on for instance, smokers, which are associated with nicotine withdrawal, the psychological effects. We also deal with the industry, which is currently battling the illicit trade in the sale of cigarettes. We know that, for instance, South Africans have not, or rather smokers have not stopped smoking as a result of the ban on the sale of cigarettes and have resorted to now purchasing these goods on the black market, which goods are substandard and are also illicit in that they do not pay the requisite taxes. Now, as industry, that would obviously be of great concern, given that following the lifting of the ban, we will have a lot of work to do together with government in ensuring that we now combat the illicit trade, which would have grown significantly in as far as networks and the market that it would target in South Africa. You would know that obviously, given the fact that these underground markets do not pay taxes, they can offer cigarettes at a far cheaper rate than what a legitimate manufacturer of cigarettes, for instance, could offer. Now, that would obviously lead to potentially a number of legitimate players along the tobacco industry value chain losing their livelihoods. So in a nutshell, that is one of many arguments which we raise in our court papers challenging the ban on the sale of cigarettes.
Yeah. So I don't think I'd be incorrect if you are saying basically that government's decision is irrational. In those court papers, you also want, cigarettes and tobacco to be declared essential goods. Is that it?
That is correct. So what we're stating is that if you look at the governing piece of legislation, which is the Disaster Management Act, nowhere in that act does it make make provision for the exclusion of the sale of cigarettes and tobacco products, unlike what it does with the sale of alcohol and the transportation thereof. Now, you would have noted, for instance, that there have been many amendments to the regulations prior to the ones which are in effect for level 4. None of those amendments included the prohibition on the ban of the sale of cigarettes. And what we're stating is that the drafters of those regulations would have been mindful of the fact that the legislation, which gives them power in as far as the lockdown period, did not make provision for this. Further, in as far as the argument for essential goods, we state that the regulations made provision for 5 subcategories of essential goods, one of them being basic goods. Now, the definition of basic goods we submit is a very broad one, and that, for instance, the regulations do not give a definition for what should be constituted as basic goods. If you look at, for instance, the Consumer Protection Act, now that states that basic goods are anything that is fit for human consumption. And we can agree, Griselda, that what's basic for you may not necessarily be basic for me. So in a nutshell, that is our argument in as far as that is concerned.
So, look, you're basically saying that the National Command Council had basically thumb-sucked the idea, that smokers are more likely or at risk of contracting COVID-19. Are those some of the aspects? Certainly that's something, which would come out in court because that is what has been consistent with what the WHO, for example, has been saying, and certain sections of the medical fraternity, which you are saying currently has not proven in this particular aspect pertaining to COVID-19?
Look, that isn't as far as the spread of COVID-19.
Yeah.
We obviously deal with the fact that government has not advanced reasons in as far as the industry is concerned, which we feel are reasonable in as far as banning the sale of cigarettes and the vis-a-vis the health risks associated therein.
Yeah.
We've had comments from certain cabinet ministers which have been very brief. I mean, when they've been asked a question, we know that Dr. Mnguni, for instance, the Minister of Health, has merely stated that he encourages people to stop smoking. Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma, during the announcement, stated that people tend to share cigarettes and the saliva which they roll certain tobacco products and other goods, such as what she termed as Zol, would mean that they would be at a greater risk of contracting the virus. Now, we know that the sharing of goods in South Africa, for example, is not limited to just cigarettes. So what our argument is that there are many other goods which are shared by South Africans at large.
Yeah.
Further, in as far as the health argument, what we say is that there are many, Zweli Mkhize, for instance, the Honourable Minister, stated yesterday and on many other occasions that the underlying factors that they're picking up mostly in relation to the deaths which have been associated with the virus have been heart disease, have been hypertension, have been diabetes, many of which are lifestyle and diet-based sort of conditions. And now what we're stating is that why, for instance, has the ban not been extended to sugary products, which are the major cause of many of these conditions. So we're in essence saying that the application of this law has been very arbitrary from government's perspective.
Just very quickly, Sinenhlanhla, I mean, preliminary research in France, for example, of COVID-19 cases seems to indicate that smoking may offer some protection against COVID-19. I guess I'm asking you, how far are you prepared to go? Because you're asking government to basically prove what they're saying.
Look, we did put this forward in the submissions which were requested from the public by the Department of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs to state that we do not know at this stage what the association between smoking and COVID-19 is. I mean, we do accept that smoking does affect the respiratory system, but in as far as the spreading of the virus, there hasn't been any conclusive evidence to link the two. So we do take note of what has been stated in France and many other jurisdictions which have advanced the same narrative, but we are not experts in as far as this is concerned. But it is something that we did put forward to government to say that studies at this stage are not conclusive. We do know that in the South African context, there currently exists no data which points to this, and it is one of the reasons we advance the government in our argument.
No possible date set at this stage before we wrap up?
We're hoping to be in court next week, Tuesday. That's what we have been advised by our legal representatives.
Sinenhlanhla Mnguni, thank you very much indeed for your time. Of course, is with the Fair Trade Independent Tobacco Association. Wants the ban on the sale of cigarettes and tobacco products overturned in court. Likely, he says, to sit next week, Tuesday. But we'll certainly bring you an update of that if that does indeed change. Let's move on.